Horror is a hard genre to execute in a board game. You know, how are you going to scare someone by drawing a card? I mean, you can get tense, don't get me wrong. Horror B-movies though, maybe that's what we need to focus on. See, Terrors of London here has a lot of cards that show you wolfmen and vampires and plague doctors and all these really interesting themes that you'd see in all these slocky horror films that don't quite horrify you, but do get you tense, do get you excited. And honestly, looking at the art in this game, this is a beautiful game. Terrors of London does that for me. I get so excited looking at this.
Absolutely. And it's fun and it's comfortable in the odd way that B-movie horror can be. It has this beautiful aesthetic that is, let's be honest, largely ripped straight from the pages of kind of late 90s, early 2000s Image comics. It's what you would absolutely call grim dark. It indulges in a little bit of excessive blood and gore. There's this overly serious flavor text on all of the cards, and I think I maybe have a soft spot for that a lot of the time.
And it's just a little bit less sincere than maybe Gothic, right?
Yeah.
So Terrors of London is a deck building game. And what's going to happen is you're going to start with a hand of fanatics and cultists. And then from the marketplace, you're going to collect wolfmen and vampires and interesting horror creatures. And you're going to create these hordes of monsters to try and take down the other team's cult leader. You do that because they have a health bar ranging from a health of 40 to 50, depending on the player. And they have certain abilities put into your deck as well. You do that by attacking the other player very directly. If you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, it's one of those type systems, or Star Realms is probably a more direct comparison.
It's pretty much Star Realms, but with a slightly different theme plastered over the top. And one very fun and special, unique mechanic, which is hoarding. Now, hoarding is this situation where you've got these monsters in your deck and they are going to basically activate the special abilities of each other. So as opposed to a normal deck building game where you're often focusing in on a very particular strategy to draw the same type of cards and execute a single powerful action over again, or a series of maybe 2 or 3 actions that interlock with each other, you are going for a wild variety of cards because you play a card from one type, say the red undead suit, and that activates the abilities of the yellow beast and green spirit type cards. And those fire off one of the other 4 types of cards. And so what you're actually trying to do, unlike any other game I've ever played, is draw an incredibly diverse rainbow of cards and get them to all fire off of one another in this kind of huge, wild and varied explosion of damage. And this game ends up being over quite quickly when that happens. Really, as soon as you see one good turn, the game's pretty much done.
And it's thrilling, not just because you're collecting these cards that have some really, honestly cool art on them that you're going to want to look at, but because you're going to see these eclectic mixes of abilities that you can see these really magical ways to proc together, right? Like the wolf is going to make the vampire do this and he's going to absorb some extra health regen. Except, I'm not sure that does work when you start getting into the game, right?
No, and the reasons for that are twofold. The first one of them is, as we talked about, one of the things that really shines in this game is the theme.
Yeah.
I actually genuinely love the art on these cards. It really speaks to a part of me that maybe belongs 5 or 10 years in my past when I was a younger teenager, but it does evoke that. It is that fun kind of grimdark. Everything is that little bit too intense, turned up to 11, so evil for the sake of being like wild and ostentatious. It's really a lot of fun. It sometimes reminds me of the best parts of Vampire the Masquerade, and that really ends up near and dear to my heart. But the thing about so many of those stories is that they're very invested in their worlds and their lore, and they build on this kind of long, epic fantasy that has mashed into the modern world. And Terrors of London is not really interested in that.
No, see, the thing is, right, is you're playing Azazel, I'm playing Lilith. You're a demon, I'm a huntress, it looks like. And somehow I'm going to collect all these monsters from an eclectic mix of themes. And you're going to collect those same monsters on your side, and we're going to go for a battle. What would be more interesting is if you had all the red cards being these zombies, for example. And this is the suburb of zombies in London, right? And then there's also the suburb of wolves, and you've got these cults battling it out with each other. It's not that, though. It's everyone's on teams with other beings for no reason, and it just feels like a mishmash. By the end of a game, it feels like your deck was a blur, and you remember the abilities on the cards, but not the cards themselves, which is such a shame to say when the cards are so beautiful.
Yeah, instead I've got these kind of trolls matching up with these hunters, and there's a zombie or a wight there somewhere, and the reasons that those are cooperating in the thin narrative this game tries to drape across the table, there's no way of making sense of this, which undermines perhaps that thematic strength that it has, and worse still, begins to, after a few games, undermine the mechanics, which I just want to briefly say again, the first few games that we played of this were fantastic. They really had these situations where you were getting these cards, activating each other, you have this giant turn, and that was so fun. That was so fun for the first couple times. And then you played it a little bit more.
Yeah, see, the thing is that the more that you play it, the more you realize that the horde mechanic, this consistent mechanic that encourages exclusively the play of rainbow decks, means two things. One, they all seem to have all the abilities spread throughout each class, so there's no specialization, but because everyone's building towards a rainbow deck, you're also just all building the same ultimate object. See, you could play this game trying to build a mono deck, but you would have to lose. Because building a mono deck means you don't use half of the card with every single card you have. So everyone builds the same objective. It's who gets the cards first.
And that's the thing, you're not really solving a puzzle. Most good deck building games, you are spending the game honing your deck into something quite specific so that you can deploy the same maneuver a few times in a row, and it's as punishing every single time your opponent reels from you having laid out this strategy, and before they can do anything to counter it, you have taken the victory.
Because of how fast the game strikes to its ending, the illusion is originally there that you've solved the puzzle, and the player who's lost has not.
But it's not that.
It's not there.
You just bought the most expensive card you could, and you drew it before the other player, and it got some bonuses because of other cards that you played. And even then, there's this temptation to say, oh, well, it might have been the character play. It might have been the character interaction. This game has a few different characters. I think the base game comes with 4, but each of those have 4 different special abilities that you can pick for them. So we had a great time playing through those the first few times, being like, oh, that was really interesting. I want to try that. It's just, we did, and there wasn't that much difference when you start to realize the reason that games get you to focus in is because building towards that one thing is an important part of deck builders.
Yes.
It gives you a characteristic that you have and the other players don't, which when you don't have that differentiation means that you're facing a crapshoot.
And I think the ultimate proof of the problem of this is that, like most deck building games, there is a way to do market denial. I can stop you from getting this card from the market. But I never saw a purpose to. Because if I could afford it, it will fit into my deck. It will proc something else. I might as well buy it. If I can't afford it, yeah, sure, I'll deny you of it. But that's not as satisfying as taking the risk of having had to purchase it, realizing it doesn't fit in, and then having to find a way to get rid of it.
No, because everything you collect is worthwhile. This is just a huge game of shoving cards into your deck.
Yeah, and even trashing, you get attack for a trashing, which feels satisfying. But how often did I need to trash in my small deck of cards that all did things together? Terrors of London is not a necessarily good game, but it does evoke the feelings of a good game.
Yeah, and I think that maybe pushes it a little bit closer to its B-movie inspirations mechanically than it might have fully understood when it was being put together. I think that the designer Brad Pye, in putting together this game, did playtest something that was fun every time.
Yeah.
Because it takes those little dials and it turns them up to 11. It's so ostentatious when you take a big turn. You can take anything you want and make it work. It just wants to be your friend, but it doesn't want to ask you any hard questions. And because of that, it's not a friend that you want to sit down for a particularly long discussion with.
But it's the same as those $2 detective novels from the supermarket, right? You can see past the illusion. It is not a particularly well-written novel. It is a book that gives you the feelings of having read a detective novel, but halfway through you get it, it's fine, you're going to read the rest of it, and then you're going to instantly forget it. This is the board game equivalent of that. And those feelings are there, and that excitement is there. And you'll pack away the box and you'll be excited to play it again because you know those feelings are going to come out again. But they're artificial in a way. They're not that organic excitement that some board games produce. I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, I think, in fact, you hit the nail on the head when you compare it to those novels, because this is literally pulp. This is the board game mechanical version of pulp. It gives you that little bit of satisfaction. It isn't particularly deep, but it doesn't need to be, because what it's interested in doing is entertaining you for a quick, fun ride, and you're going to have a good time. And let's be honest, I don't think I had a particularly great time at the start of it. It's not going to hit everybody. It's not going to resonate with everyone. But if you are deeply bought into this theme, I think it does a lot for you on those first few plays. And I think if somebody asks you to play it, heck, I didn't enjoy it. And if somebody asks me if I want to play it, I probably still would, because it's not a bad time. It's never a bad time.
It's completely inoffensive. And you know what, actually, as someone who loves the theme, what it reminded me of was when I was very young and I had all these Pokemon cards, and all I'd do was go, ooh, Charizard, I love that. Put that over there. Ooh, Psyduck, love that. Put that over there. You know, I'm just collecting these things that I like with no rhyme or reason. And that was a bad deck. And that played exclusively bad games. But it was exciting because I loved those things. This game does that. This is the childhood version equivalent of that, right? If you were to try and make a good deck out of this, it's the same as any other deck. It doesn't matter.
Which is the tricky thing, as this game wants to be in the realm of deck builders, which, to be
in the realm of Star Realms, they might say.
Yeah, well, it's basically Star Realms.
It is, yeah.
It's just maybe not quite as good as Star Realms, and I don't think either of us enjoy that too much, but we would say that that is just a fundamentally better designed game.
But see, Star Realms is a straight up better game. But because I'm not super big on the design of really either of them, but the theme here resonates to me, I would 10 times out of 10 say, let's play Terrors of London over Star Realms.
But if we think a little bit wider, that's where the problem begins to set in. Because when you're talking about deck builders, my favourite game in the whole world is Dominion, and I will happily play Dominion any day of the week. That has so much more depth here. We both love Valley of Kings, which is another great game that encourages you to do these same few actions, you know, trashing, collecting cards, moving points over here. It just does it a lot better. We played Undaunted the other week.
Oh, man. Fantastic, right? And those games, all in their own sense, are innovative. And those games, all in their own sense, if you do not like the theme of Valley of the Kings, you will still enjoy Valley of the Kings, because the mechanics there are so tight. There are problems with it, sure, but there's mechanics. The core part of that is so interesting and unique in itself that you'll get something out of it, as long as you like deck building, which is the basis of them.
That's the split here. It's not that you enjoy Valley of the Kings, because I think some people might bounce off of it, but it's that you get something, you see something more, you see how the game is trying to do something very interesting. I don't think Terrors of London is going to drag you into something interesting in the same way. And that's not a problem. It is pulpy, it is sloppy, it is everything that the theme cries out to be.
Yeah.
It's just that maybe that's not going to do enough for you, but if you really like the theme, maybe it is. And this is one of those games where the theme is really what's going to determine whether you go for it or not.
But I have to wonder, does this have the same problem that pulp novels have? That if you're not familiar with the tropes, the motifs, the scenes, the actions, the characters, if you haven't actually read a proper, well-written, engaging detective novel before reading the pulp novel, do you just bounce off it, right? Because the mechanics of this as a deck builder, we're familiar with, and we get, and that we know why they're fun. But in this form, they're not necessarily done well enough to be fun. It's just that I know when playing this card, the feeling of fun. I know that attacking you is an engaging thing. If I hadn't played a previous deck builder that did that I enjoyed, would I be here just for the theme? And then is that enough to hold me? Or do I need to have had some previous investment?
I think you're maybe putting that backwards. If you have it so that the pulp comes before you have that deep genre fiction that you've dived into, maybe that pulp has enough of the little bits that you've never seen before that you really dive in and love it. You go, this is something unique, this is something special, I've never seen this before, this is fun. And I think Terrors of London might have that for some people that haven't played a lot of deck builders. You've got plenty to look forward to here, plenty to have fun with. If you have, there is some questions as to why you're coming back to something like this rather than one of the more well-established names in the genre.
Yeah, in which case this kind of maybe does fit into a market of that this is a great entry to deck builders. If you don't like sci-fi, and that cuts Star Realms out, and if you don't like farmers and sheep, and that cuts out Base Dominion, right? Maybe this theme really resonates with you, and this is the entry point that then 2 weeks from now you're going to be like, man, Dominion's cool too, Star Realms is great, because then you can see why those mechanics are fantastic.
A fun game, but maybe not a great one.
Yeah, hard to recommend, but you will know if you want it, and I think that's good enough. And hey, it's going to sit on my shelf for a while.
Yes.
Thanks for watching Supply Pool. We've got more videos here and in the future here. Until then, you'll just see Yod's chest, which, I mean, it's not the worst thing to see.